Today I wanted to talk about my experience with the most recent Becca's Bookopalthon. I said in my TBR that I wanted to participate in it, and I did. Unfortunately, it wasn't the best reading experience for me. Like, the Bookopalthon itself was great. I loved the roll drops and all of that. But the books that I picked for myself were not so much winners for me this time, which is really disappointing. But anyways, let's hop into it. I went for 5 of the prompts, 4 or 5. As I go through them, we'll get to the number. But I went through a number of the prompts, not all of them. Even with that, I only finished 2 books, and both of them were very short because, again, it was a bit of a rough reading experience. So let's talk about it. The very first one I had, if you watched my TBR, you should recognize, but is Daughters of Ruin, which I put on my TBR because the first roll drop that we got before the Bookopalthon started was a book with a dark cover or a fantasy, so I went for both of those prompts in this book because dark cover and fantasy. However, I haven't even finished the prologue of this book. It's a bit much for me and not really what I was expecting, and I may or may not end up DNFing this one because I'm not having a good time trying to get through it. I mean, I haven't even finished the prologue, so as I said, there's that. So there we go. And then for the next roll drop, I went with the contemporary prompt. And we come to one of the books that I finished, which is The Unsaid by Erin Blaylock. Oh boy, this book. Okay, so this book is an LDS fiction book. I am LDS, so I think that's part of why I had picked it up. And like reading the description on the back, it's a really kind of a fun concept. Maggie's job at the Department of Thoughts and Records in heaven is pretty simple. She's a spirit curator, an observer of human life who sorts and categorizes every unsaid thought. And then when Eric shows interest in the new girl at work, Maggie can't help ignoring the rules to understand the wonders of mortality and love, but meddling in mortal affairs has consequences that she could never have imagined. So, it's kind of an interesting concept. I wanted to see how it played out just from that. But oh boy, this book. I'm pretty sure it must have been like indie published essentially, because it could definitely have used at least one more round of edits. It was every couple of chapters I was noticing weird little grammar errors, words that were not in quite the correct form. Like at one point they were talking about wrapping something up, and they used wrapped like a person wrapped a song, not like a person wrapped up a present. So there were little things like that all throughout that I was just like, oh boy, did this even get edited? Yikes. Another thing with it too, the author talks about one of his other novels, this one here, The Land of the Look Behind, in the book. And generally, I feel like name dropping yourself in a novel is a little bit of a faux pas. It's a little sketch. If you ask me, I get it. You want people to read your books, but name dropping your own book within your book, a little weird to me. And also, since Maggie is like reading the guy's thoughts essentially to categorize them and stuff, if that's really what it's like to live in a man's mind, I'm very glad that I'm a woman. It wasn't like there was anything super like dirty or cruel to women in it, but he was a miserable person to be in the head of, quite honestly. He complained all the time, and so, you see some of that at the beginning, and you think he's going to have an arc where he becomes a nicer person, and that's kind of implied by the end, but he's still pretty much a grumpy person throughout the majority of the story from the perspective that we're getting of him. And it was just like, oh, why am I reading this? But it was only like 200 pages, and I wanted to give it a shot because I was curious about how the story would end up and things, and so I finished it. But I'm probably going to give this book away because I don't think I could ever stomach reading it again. But yeah, so there's book number 1 that I actually finished, was my contemporary prompt. and I'm kind of sad I picked this one for the contemporary. But I did it, and that book is done. The next prompt that I went with was the first in a series, was part of the third roll drop. I think technically also Person of Color was one of them, so it could also probably fit for that. But I had just picked up Queen of the Conquered from the library, and I was like, ooh, yeah, let's jump into that. And I also didn't get very far in this one. I'm on page 11, so I didn't get very far in this one either. I like this one a lot more than Daughters of Ruin. I just was also trying to push through the Unsaid at the time, and I was like, yes, we'll come back to this. This will be like my reward book. And then the Unsaid took a lot longer to finish than I was expecting because it was such a struggle to read. But I do plan on finishing this one, and as I said, with my March TBR and how I'm doing like the season-a-thon and stuff, the ones that I do want to keep reading, which is this one at this point, since I don't know if I'll finish Daughters of Ruin and the one other book I already finished, but that I'll just extend through the rest of the month and try to finish it by the end of the month too. Anyways, and then we had our final roll drop, and one of the prompts for that was to read a book that's in a genre that you normally don't read. So I picked out the Jade Flute, which, again, if you saw my March TBR, you know was also on my season-a-thon one, so two birds with one stone this one, which I was in part desperate to have something that I actually wanted to read and wanted to finish at the time. And so I was like, yep, I can do that. This one's tiny. I've already started it. We can totally finish this during it. And I did, and it was fun, and I really like the prose poetry. I even saved my favorite one in here because I thought it'd be fun to share, to give you kind of a taste of what this book was like. This one that I have saved here is called Like a Cormorant. The cormorant stands still, thinking all alone at the river's edge. His staring eye follows the changing waters. When strollers come too close to him, balancing the long neck, he flaps away, waiting in the tall reeds till the intruders pass, wishing to stare again at the undulating of the stream. And at dusk, when the moon is rippling on the waves, the cormorant still stands, thinking, with one foot in the current, just so a man, his heart burning with passion, stares at the undulations of his dream. I mean, isn't that pretty? It just evokes such a fun image, picturing like that bird standing on the stream. And like rereading this now, I'm also realizing that I was working on an audiobook during the Bookopalthon that I didn't pick for any of the prompts. I was in the middle of Anna and the Swallow Man, and that was part of my break. Like, I just need something that I'm enjoying. It doesn't fit any of the prompts, but I'm gonna read it anyway. And anyways, at one point in that, it talks about them being in wetlands and seeing like a crane or something, and I was thinking of this prose poem being what had originally been referenced, and that they had already talked about this bird. But now that I'm like thinking about it, I'm like, no, I had just barely read the Cormorant poem, and that's why I was thinking that. So it just, anyways, it stuck with me, clearly, if I thought it was part of another book. But yeah, so that was my Bookopalthon. I finished 2 books, both very short, one of which I'd even already started. And then I haven't even finished the prologue of another one, and only got to page 11 of the other. So I'm disappointed at myself for how I did at the Bookopalthon, and I'm disappointed in some of the book picks that I made because Daughters of Ruin ended up being a bit of a bust, and the Unsaid was very painful, and I don't know why I pushed myself to finish reading it. But here we are, hopefully the next time we do this, because I did still have fun, and I love the idea of the prompts coming up last minute and having to like find books that fit the themes of the prompts. I love that. So hopefully the next time Bookopalthon comes around, I have some better books that I pick for myself. Guess we'll find out. But if you participated at Bookopalthon, feel free to comment down below if you've read any of these books or what your reading was for the Bookopalthon, if you had better luck in your picks than I did, all that kind of thing. That's all I've got for now. This is the Umlaut Harper signing out.